Hello and welcome back to the 100-day art challenge. If you've been watching so far, you will know that I have been using Michael Harding paint. In this video, however, I will be using some Rowney Georgian paint, which is much cheaper, much easier to use liberally without worrying about how much it costs. So that's the idea behind the showing you this first part of the video. Now they are old, so I had to use a pair of pliers to pry open the caps on the top. Sometimes you can just get a really good grip and unscrew them, but for some reason with these I just couldn't do it. A friend once told me a trick where you can wedge the cap of the paint in a door and then start closing the door until it's tight and then turn it, but that is going to damage the door, not massively, but it's going to put a dent on the inside of the door and it'll probably remove the paint. So that's why I don't do that technique, even though it was a good tip. If you're somewhere where the doors are either quite big and probably more solid than my doors that I have here, then that might work. Or something which isn't painted that well, or something like that. But for here I didn't do that. Now this landscape that I'm going to be painting is from a trip which me and my friend Petra took to go and see the Arctic terns, which are in a little protected area on the North Wales coast, and we were walking along there and it was lovely. It was a very nice day and we were walking towards this area near the beach, so it was getting quite sandy, but when I looked back at where we'd come from, it was fields and different patches of land, and then there was a hillside, and I just thought it looked brilliant. So I took a picture because it was such a nice day, and it was one of many that I'd taken, but most of them were trying to capture the terns on the camera roll, and I didn't do a great job of doing that. So instead I found on my phone that I had this picture from back then of the landscape, and it just seemed like a nice reference and inspiration for this submission. So that's what I'm trying to paint. Normally I'll try to paint something either impressionistic and quick, or a little bit more picked over and trying to be more representational, I suppose. You'll see that in the coming videos from my still life studies. The one that I uploaded yesterday was somewhere in between impressionism and more classical realism. It wasn't overly rendered, but it wasn't loose enough to be truly impressionistic, so it's somewhere there. It was just a loose sketch basically. Whereas for this painting I've gone a little bit more stylized and I quite like it. I think it's something that I'd like to do more of in the future, and it's hard to explain where it comes from. It wasn't planned necessarily, and I do like the idea of planning a painting, how I want it to work out. So just a loose idea before I start. Just some inspiration, something which I've seen online that I appreciate. It will never be a copy of that person's style or work, but it will just guide my marks and my intentions throughout the painting, which will assist the development of it. It's these stages where you make these crucial decisions that I think I would like to put more thought into in the future. And for this it just happened to go in a direction that I appreciated, and it turned out being something which was more due to a reaction to every mark that I was making, and that can go wrong quite often. What you can see me doing now is just trying to lighten the foreground area, and it becomes quite a thick and creamy patchwork of brush marks, which normally wouldn't be good necessarily, because it's going to be, it's hard to explain. If it's not varied in the colour or the tone, then it's just going to be an odd texture. But because I left this one so stylized, it has these layers to the landscape, and I really think that's an interesting approach to making landscape paintings, to have these segments, some which are quite flat and others which are flat but textured, and then having a pop of colour to finish it off. And I think that's another aspect which I appreciate about this painting. I'm not trying to say it's a great painting, but as far as my painting sketches go, this is one which I did enjoy and appreciate the direction it went in. And I think it's because the sky is I always describe it as a negative space around the land. And if that is a shape, it takes up an amount of the surface which is a nice, visually pleasing slice at the top of a painting, then that really adds a lot for me. And I think that's what I enjoy with other people's paintings, is seeing where that composition or decision pays off. And for me, sadly, it is just by chance it seems to work. It's not especially planned. I wish I would have planned this painting to be like this, but it just turned out that I was reacting to things and just seemed to have the sense to stop myself from brushing things in too much. If I would have smoothed things out too much, I would have lost a lot of what is valuable in this painting to me. Instead, I made certain marks. I'd had certain decisions at the time which, on reflection, I thought I might let that sit as it is because it looks quite interesting, and just continued with that thought process. And that's not always the easiest thing to do, but I think that's why this seems to have worked, is that I just happen to have been in the right headspace. And you can see here I'm adding darker colours to the foreground, but immediately I lighten that again. I don't want it to be too high a contrast in the foreground, and yet I want it to have texture to it, so that it suggests some difference in surface compared to the midground, and the background being the hillside and the sky. So that was part of what I think really sits well with me. Now, you may not like this painting. I'm not saying that you should be convinced this is a good painting. It's just one which I look at after the fact and think, I actually would quite like to do a series similar to that, or try to learn from it and make choices like that with the intention to go in that direction in the future. If I can do that, then I think I could start to build upon an interesting body of work and see which direction it takes me, because this would only be the first step. But that's all it takes. Something being successful and different for you, and it doesn't seem to me to remind me of anyone else's work. There's no one online who I thought, well, it's very similar to them, because I don't really think it is. I'm not sure. You may recognize it as similar to someone else's work, but for me, I don't know of any other landscape I've seen which is done in this style. And again, I'm not trying to credit myself with creating a style. I'm just saying that it doesn't remind me of someone else's work, and it's certainly not like anything else I normally make. So I'd like to see how far I can go with this type of stylistic direction of painting. It's not happened since, so there's no painting that I've made since which will follow, but that's what I made. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you tomorrow.